You may have noticed we're going through some changes here. We're still dedicated to B2B marketing, of course, but we're excited to announce that our rebrand to the If You Market podcast is in now. And we're constantly looking at ways to improve the show. So we're also going to be adding some short product highlight segments in the near future here. So stay tuned for those. We haven't worked out all the details, but the general idea on this is that they're going to be designed to expose you to companies in the MarTech space and help answer questions you might have, figure out what you should be considering, shouldn't be considering, that kind of stuff. So anyway, more to come on that, but thanks for listening to the show, and now on with the show. Thank you for listening to the If You Market podcast. I'm your host, Sky Cassidy, and joining us today will be Steve Zakur, like Baker, right, Steve?
You got it.
So Stephen is the CEO of Solo Segment. He'll be telling us today why, if you market, they will come. Like I said, he's the CEO of Solo Segment. He spent many years before that at IBM, and then from there went into independent consulting, and now is running the show over at Solo Segment. Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, man.
Excellent. So site search is going to be our subject today, something I'm really interested in because I'm not very experienced in it. We've all seen the little search, the little search box there at the top of websites, but we probably haven't thought much of it except for when we're trying to find something that we can't on a site.
Indeed.
So before we really jump into site search, though, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself, kind of your pathway into B2B marketing and into Solo Segment there?
Yeah, you bet. So like most B2B marketers, I'm actually a finance guy by trade, right? So, I'm kind of an accidental marketer from that perspective. But as you suggested, I've spent a lot of time in the technical business, and I made the leap very early in my career from the finance world to the technical world, mostly because I was very good at seeing the intersection of business and technology and helping technologists make the leap to really understand business context and vice versa. And of course, during years with IBM, I did a lot of work with marketing professionals. And whether it was looking at MarTech as it was evolving and becoming more important for marketing staff within the company, or even working on a lot of the technologies that enable customers to come to IBM's websites and be effective, one of the things that was really a bit of a black hole was site search. And, again, just from a orientation perspective, when we talk about search, we're not talking about Google, right? We're talking about what happens on a company's website. And so I spent many years on and off working with marketing professionals, working with search professionals, and kind of coming out of IBM, really discovered that there continues to be this gap where marketing professionals generally understand the value of site search, but it's generally owned within a company by the IT guys, and trying to make sure that we have ways of understanding the importance and the effectiveness and the value of site search to the business, and then aligning everybody through measurements, through technologies that help improve site search kind of became our reason for being. And that's really what Solo Segment is all about, is helping marketing professionals really harvest the value, unlock the value that is trapped in site search today, because it is likely the most neglected asset on a company's website.
Yeah, I think if you were to do a study of marketers and different subjects, every subject we've covered on the podcast here, this is the one that throw myself under the bus that I know the very least about. I had to go and Google it just to make sure I didn't go way off path while talking to you here, because
Sure.
it's definitely an overlooked area in B2B marketing. So you mentioned your company there, Solo Segment. You said a little bit about what you guys do. Can you tell us more about Solo Segment as well, just so kind of everybody knows the context that you're coming from within? Is site search your guys' central? Is that what you do, or is that part of what you do?
It's part of what we do. It's a large part of why we came into being. So Solo Segment started as an analytics company, and it was that specific focus about site search. Understanding what's going on within a company's website search is very, very difficult, because today the tools that are available are largely, marketing tools, things like Google Analytics and the measurements that Google Analytics has in it that really are focused on the marketing experience or the marketing journeys that occur on websites. doesn't really fit effectively in a site search model when you're trying to really understand, are people successful when they're using site search? And so they traditional measures like bounce rate and time on page are applied to a search engine results page. But at the end of the day, it's not really what you're concerned with. And so we figured out that what really your users are concerned with, your customers, your prospects are concerned with, is success. And so we developed a measurement methodology that really allows a company to assess, are their visitors, are their prospects, are their customers successful when they search? And so that's a standard analytics package like many others that you see out there. But we are beginning to extend beyond that because we realize that pointing at problems, that can be helpful, but it's not ideal, right? What you really want is, okay, well, tell me what I should do, how I should fix this. What's the next step to be
Right. They have the
more
commercial out
effective?
there right now that where the guys always say, "Oh no, I'm just the guy that tells you have bugs. I don't actually come in and exterminate them for you."
Exactly. So
You guys identify it and address it, kind of.
yeah, and that's where we're going. And so our first step in that is automation. So we've got a couple of product features that now use the same data that we're collecting to assess and evaluate search success, and beginning to apply that in ways that will have some automatic improvements. One of the ways is a type ahead search feature that, instead of being very traditional, looking at common terms or recent terms or popular terms like most type ahead features it uses actual success metrics to present terms that will lead to more successful outcomes. So it's those
Is
types
that
of
within their specific site? Are they programming it for, or
yeah,
is it still nice? So for their
yeah,
product base,
you
you're
bet.
typing in starting to type something that normally would give you, you type it into Google, you're going to get totally different autofill results. But within their site, they know it's the beginning of a product name or something like that. They can finish it off for their specific products.
That's exactly right. So it's customized for their products and customized for the success that their customers, their prospects are seeing. So automation is, so we started with analytics. Automation is something we realize has a lot of value to our customers because they're busy, their people are busy. It's hard to really get a lot of focus on the levers and changing the levers, changing the content, changing what needs to be changed, usually to make success or search results more successful. So automation was kind of the second place we went to focus. But of course, where everybody's going today, and certainly where we're going, is search is a lot of data, right? Search,
Right.
if you look at just what the search terms are, there's some intent data there. If you look at what results come back and how people interact with those results, that's more data. And then if you look at the paths beyond search, right, they go to that first landing page and they begin to take a journey. That's even more data about the visitor. And once you
So
have,
you're not just directing them, you're also collecting what they're
yes,
searching for, kind of.
yeah,
Oh,
you
getting
bet.
dangerous there, Stephen.
Yeah, well, you bet. So yeah, we've been through our GDPR journey, and the good news is we most of the data that we collect is anonymous, and like every website or web service, you have to collect some. I'll put air quotes around personal data. And certainly
Right.
the EU considers things like IP address as personal data. And you need that for just to make the thing function. But once we're done, collecting the data, we anonymize it. So we stay out of jail on all of the personal data issues that are kind of coming up today. And we really anonymize those journeys. But that data in and of itself is tremendously valuable. And of course, over the past 18 to 24 months, the tools that allow you to analyze that data, specifically the machine learning tools, have become a lot more powerful and a lot easier to use. And so once you have that volume of data, you can begin to do a lot of interesting things with it, not just report on it, not just automate, some of the problem solving, but also begin to give marketers insight into, okay, what's really going on here and how can we make whatever journey a person's on more effective.
Right. The purpose of data is to give people better experiences.
Absolutely.
It's not to manipulate or something like that. It's really to give people better experiences. I feel like as we talk more, I might get angry because I have my experience in site search. Whenever I go to it, it's because I need to find something specific on a website and I can't easily find it. And I rarely go to it because maybe early on in its life, I tried it a couple times. It didn't work well. It's like when you have to say somebody's name into a phone system. Every time I try to use it, I feel like I never find what I want,
Sure.
and it makes me angry. And I guess if you guys have solved that problem, if you can help people do a better job of the site search, so people like me and everybody else out there who's tried site search doesn't get angry, that would be an awesome thing to fix. And then for all of our listeners, if they can do that on their sites, the last thing you want is to pay all that money to drive all that traffic to your website, and you need to convert these people, and some large percentage of them are getting angry instead of being converted.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a huge problem, right? First of all, that learned behavior, right? We've all learned how bad site search is. And so therefore we all go to Google. But I think you hit on a very important point. As a marketing professional, when you say the word search, when I say the word search is to any of my prospects, even to my customers, the default setting in their brain is to think about okay, we're talking about Google, we're talking about organic search and paid search, we're talking about all those top of funnel activities. And you're exactly right. Companies spend billions of dollars a year. It's a big industry, right? Ask Google, ask Facebook. But spend billions of dollars a year on that top of funnel activity, getting people to the site, right? Getting people to the right landing page.
Right. Half the time I'm looking for what to buy. I'm one click away from buying.
Oh,
and instead
absolutely.
I get infuriated, and now I hate that brand because I had a bad experience on their site.
Yeah, you bet. And in an ideal world, if you're a simple B2C product or a simple maybe B2B product, ideally, yeah, there is that kind of one click. I land on the product page, I land on the offering page, I land on whatever page that there is a call to action on, and I click and I'm done, right? And now the marketer has, gone from a marketing activity directly to a sale, right? So for a simple product, or maybe very quickly and rapidly gone from a marketing qualified lead to a sales qualified lead if it's a more complex product. So in an ideal world, that top of funnel goes to the bottom of the funnel really quickly.
Yeah.
But the reality is that's not how humans work, right? Humans
and frequently goes to another website. I can't find it here. I guess I better go to who else has whatever it is I need. And so you've lost them. Like if they're doing a specific search on your site and they're not finding what they want, even if I know it's there, I say, okay, Home Depot doesn't have this. Let me check Lowe's site.
Yeah.
You just lost me because I couldn't find what I know is there. I've seen it in your store, but I can't find it on your site. And so I get frustrated, you leave. So it sounds like there's a specific audience for site search. I mean, there's some companies that it's probably don't even really need it on their site. It's a very simple site. And then there's other companies, it sounds like, that really, this is a big part of their site. Can you speak to that a little bit, kind of who this is for? And everybody that's left out, keep listening anyway, you'll learn something.
Sure thing. Well, it's interesting about that. So we had a kind of a point of view coming in and when we started building the products that was, the B2C world, the real commerce driven transactional world wasn't our sweet spot. And it was really the large enterprise, B2B, high consideration, long sales cycle, high consideration sort of processes that were our sweet spot, because those are the folks who are going to be doing lots of searching, lots of investigating, et cetera, right? Those visitors, those buyers, those prospects. And so it was our original hypothesis that B2C wasn't in scope. So let me leave B2C out of scope for a second, but we're going to come back to that. So the original
only briefly, because we're a B2B show, so I don't like to give them much airtime.
You bet, but I think there are a lot of companies that bridge both worlds. They have kind of a transactional nature and a B2B nature. So these B2B companies who have some transactional business, but they also have the high consideration. But yeah, the real sweet spot we found is, it's the companies north of $100 million with generally more complex buying cycles and, frankly, more complex product portfolios. So if you're and I'll use my alma mater, for example, IBM. If you are IBM, people are searching on your website. And now they're not doing relative to the total traffic, not a lot of searching right now. It's a percentage basis, but the volume is huge.
Right.
And so those are really, if you think about the companies that are in our sweet spot, it is generally companies that are B2B, high consideration, and generally larger, more complex product portfolios. All that being said, we're having a tremendous, if you looked at my sales sheet for this week or my call sheet for this week, you'd see we're talking to a lot of companies that are in that 100 to 500 million range, kind of the mid-tier companies that really are spending a lot amount of money at the top of the funnel. And what they want to avoid is spending more money at the top of the funnel. Because something you said earlier is you go back, right? You can't find what you're looking for. So you go back to Google. Well, just think about that from a marketing budget perspective, right? You paid once to get the guy to come to your site. He didn't find what he wants, so he leaves. And now you're going to pay again to get him back to your site, right? So he might
he goes to a competitor.
Or, worse, that's where your competitors live. You got it. And now he's off to one of your competitors.
And like you said, you got him all the way through the cycle, all the way to that point, and then lost them. And not because you weren't the best product or your salespeople didn't sell them well or any of those things, just because there, somebody didn't dot an I and cross a T. That's the most painful. I talk to a lot of people that have found products like what you guys do, that the problem they solve is this one little spot where if somebody mishandles the ball, you lose everything you've done. And it's just it's a little technical thing like this where you've invested so much time and energy, and there could be, it could be a small consumer purchase product on the line or a large enterprise software, and you've got this guy in the door, he's going to start moving forward, but you lose him over a technical thing, over something that's, for you guys easy, for us, something we don't really understand maybe, but something so easy to address, and you're losing sales. It's like you're bleeding out somewhere that you don't realize is there. And it's so quick and easy to address that issue, I guess I'd say. I mean, I say quick and easy. I don't mean to talk a little about what you guys do, but it's very small compared to your whole sales pipeline.
Absolutely.
Where you're losing a significant percentage of people for no other reason than you just didn't know. You have a blind spot to clients falling through the cracks. That's a little bit crazy. I love it when I identify these. I like to analogize it to, I used to ride a motorcycle, and I had fixed it up myself when I was in college, and I didn't do a very good job. So I was constantly finding things wrong with it. It ran, but I was always finding things wrong with it. And I was happy every time I found something, because the bike ran okay. It was a little sputtery, but every time I found something, I was like, now it's going to run better. And I always thought, God, if I could just find all the little errors, all the little things I did wrong when I rebuilt the engine, it would run so smooth. And that's kind of, I think, what a lot of people's sales and marketing machines are like. They have all these little blind spots where they don't know where they're losing stuff. They're losing part of the machine they built for sales is just slipping through the cracks. And, guys like you guys can come in and you can fix this site search, and suddenly it's a boost to their sales. It's a boost to their whole pipeline that they had no idea they were losing.
Yeah, no, you bet. And it's that leakage in the funnel, if you will, where you really gain a lot of value. I mean, if you look at kind of our average client who starts with us and is looking at their search success rates, generally search success rates are about 23-24%, kind of in that neighborhood on average when we start working with a client. And if you think about what percentage of your traffic goes into site search, so there's that frustration factor, right? So some clients, it's a very small percentage, but some of our clients is 20-30% of their traffic is using search, and only 1 in 5 of those people are being successful. So that could be up to 5 or 10% of the people who are coming to your website are using your search and being dissatisfied. Right. And that's a pretty significant, if you talk about customer satisfaction or customer experience perspective, that's a real lousy experience.
The loss of all the investment to get them to that point is crazy. When I see things, so I'm more excited. I'm less angry and more excited about site search now.
Good.
I'm wondering, you could probably look at companies and say, hey, if they have a campus with, if you have 2 or more buildings in your campus, then you're probably a good candidate for site search. I mean, you talk about something like IBM, stuff like that. When you have your own campus, you need to focus on site search, I would think.
There you go. Absolutely. And of course, I just want to touch briefly on B2C because I know that this is the target of this discussion, but what is surprising is how many sophisticated B2C companies, and these are very large competitors, folks who should be terrified of Amazon, they're also struggling to do this right, because unlike a smaller B2C company, they generally disaggregate their commerce engine, if you will. So they don't buy a package, catalog, commerce engine, et cetera. They generally buy a catalog capability and a search capability and then a checkout capability, right? They have very specialized technologies, and they still have lousy search metrics. So even in the B2C world, folks who are working hard to compete with the Amazons of the world, it is surprising how even there, folks struggle to do search right.
Now, how many of the people you look at have site search and just need to improve it versus don't have a site search on their site at all? I mean, I see a lot of sites with no site search, and maybe they're trying really hard to retain people, to not have people bounce off their site. And maybe they're not even considering site search as, oh, this is a big part of a solution. Instead of trying to make it navigatable through your site, people just need to be able to search for it.
Yeah, and I think that we do find here and there companies that don't have site search, although most of the ones who are kind of in our target market do. And certainly, I'd rather not have to sell you on the idea that search is good before I sell you on the idea that doing search well is good, right? So, we're usually only targeting companies that are have search, but we have seen a trend, in it's basically a user experience design kind of trend, that if your product portfolio is simple enough that you really want the user experience to kind of intuitively lead people to the right conclusion. And so you do see websites that don't have search at all. And I think that it's an interesting opportunity. If you could do it well, I see there's no reason to do it. More power to you. I think, though, that a majority of the companies will find that the complexity of their products, the complexity of their kind of go-to-market and the types of, consumers that they approach, makes it difficult to live without site search. If I knew ideally who you were when you came to my site, right? And, that might become much more difficult, in the near future. But if I knew who you were, so I knew you were a technology buyer, I knew you were from a specific industry, and I could serve you the right content in the right way, hey, maybe I could get away without having site search. But the reality is, knowing that is tremendously difficult. So you do your best. You do your best to present the right design, the right user experience. But at the end of the day, people are going to click on that search button or go back to Google because they're going to want that extra piece of information that you haven't been able to design into the system.
And it dawns on me, and I'm sorry, when I find if anybody who listens to these podcasts regularly, you can probably tell the difference when I find a product that I get excited about a little bit, or not a product, but a topic that I get excited about. It sounds like I'm doing a infomercial for it almost. Okay. So I'm not trying to sound like an infomercial for you guys, or for site search in general, I guess it would be more likely. But it dawns on me that even if you have a well-designed site, it's silly not to also have a good site search function, because some people, I never use site search myself. I'm probably going to start using it a lot more now. But I noticed people within our own organization using it sometimes, and using it like within our CRM, there's a general search field. Like, why would you search for something that way? There's all these search parameters you can use. But they would bring them right to where they wanted to go. And I would imagine there's a certain portion of the population out there that's their go-to thing. So
yeah, it is. It's our default. It's a default way of approaching the world these days.
Yeah. You've got a super intuitive website, but some of the people coming there, they want to search a site search bar that they can search for something for, because that's their way of doing things. It's like, different types of learners, you have different types of searchers, I guess, and some have that. So even if your site if you spend a ton to make your site super intuitive and really smooth, and they can almost always get where they want to go, except for why lose those people that can't.
But there's also a kind of a flip of that metaphor. So if you rewind 15 years or so, back when search in general was only 5 or 10 years old, so this is the early 2000s, there was a lot of discussion about what would it take for search to supplant navigation. And there's a whole lot of reasons that it couldn't at that time. Part of it was behavioral, right? We weren't trained searchers at that point.
Oh, so instead of having a navigation bar, you would just have one search thing, and you'd type like the Google thing on a website. And you type contact if you want to go to the contact page, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and there's a bank, there's an investment bank that has done exactly that. You load their website, and all you get in the middle of the page is a search bar.
Interesting.
Now, I'm not going to tell you who it is because it's a really lousy product. they haven't implemented it well, and I don't want to embarrass them. But I really admire the boldness of that, because we are searchers, right? I mean, that's what Google gives you, right? Google gives you, now we all type up in the address bar of our browser these days, but
Right.
Google gives you one bar and says, hey, tell me what you want to know. What is the question that you have that if I answered it would make you happy, would progress your experience? And that really is the promise of the search bar. And so we are all really well trained by Google to do that. And that's why, we have, as when we get to a website, we have on one shoulder is our search angel, which is saying, search is the best way to go, right? Google taught you this. And of course, the devil on the other shoulder is, but you've been disappointed by websites before, so I'm not going to use that. So
yeah, that's me. I stay
exactly.
away from it. Only trust Google. All the other search bars are not worth your time. So I was thinking this whole time, I'm thinking this site search stuff sounds great, but it doesn't really work for my company. That's a shame. And then I realized when you talk about putting the one bar in the page, it dawns on me, that's like an iPhone of a website almost. You're just saying, we're going to simplify this all the way down. My company's a data company, and people search for data all the time. I thought, oh, wow, rather than having a whole bunch of options, you could let people start just by putting in and generally what they want and program something for that. That would probably be a really convenient way to let people at least get started in their search.
Yeah, we're working with one company that almost does exactly that. They're a standards company. They have lots of documentation, and they used to have this very complex user interface. And our advice to them was, no, this is really a search engine, right? This is not a product that people want, and so why not give them an experience that will just be a search engine? So they're in development right now on their new experience, but it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that design. But they really are a search engine at the end of the day, because people just want to get to the one document that they know is the one answer to their question. Well, so why not just make it a box?
It isn't like you have to exactly nail it in that way either. At Google, you don't put in your search and they give you an answer. They give you pages and pages and pages of options. Then
right,
you're just narrowing it down and kind of ordering it by most likely to be interested in.
Sure.
So great stuff. I want to take a quick break here, but after the break, we'll get a little more into site search. I want to kind of dig in with you to maybe some tips, some things to do, some things not to do, some entry-level site search stuff people can do, some more advanced stuff that people can look to do, all that kind of good stuff after the break. Thanks for being on here with us, Stephen, and we'll be right back in a minute.
Did you know that 80% of successes are driven by mindset? Jamie Crosby helps forward-thinking companies of all sizes optimize their sales by teaching their people to develop and maintain a peak performance mindset. Give your team the mental tools they need to break through obsolete barriers, improve team dynamics, and generate the high-impact behaviors that propel companies forward year after year by going to jamiecrosby.com.
All right, we're back from the break. You're listening to Sky Cassidy here on the If You Market podcast. We've got Stephen Zakur on with us. We're talking about site search. That's a tough one for me.
Yeah, there you go. You nailed it second time.
Talking about site search or on-site search, the search bar within websites for getting people where they want to go. We've covered a lot already, a lot more to get to still here. We'll try to keep this short enough for everyone for one commute or however you listen. But Stephen, getting back into this, one of the notes I had scrawled down here, I guess before we get to other subject, was geolocation. Does that come into play with site search? Is it kind of like the customizing of website experience for people? Is any of that involved? Do you look at where people are coming from and cater the site search to that?
Yeah, so we don't currently do that, mostly because our customers don't need that. So as
that
I
makes
said,
sense.
Yeah, right. You go where your customers are, right? But if we were to, we are talking to a number of large B2C companies. I think that gets a whole lot more important, right? When you have to deliver a physical good somewhere. That's really, really important. A lot of our customers are, if they are delivering a physical good, it's a large piece of technology that has to go on a truck. And so, all that geo stuff, generally gets bottom of the funnel during the sales process, gets sorted out. So again, a lot of our customers are in that, either in the services business, and I would say a majority of our customers have services sorts of businesses, or are in, kind of that high consideration, long product life cycle. So geolocation isn't as important. And one large global technology firm we work with, they get to geography by the website people are approaching on it. So that is one way you get to it, but not through GPS tracking or that sort of thing.
Right. Okay, good. I had that note, wanted to make sure I got to that at some point here. You mentioned a client that you'd work with. If you don't mind, if you have any examples of whether it's great successes, just examples, case study type things in general, stories, anything like that you can share with us?
Yeah, you bet. So, I mean, clearly one of the reasons that site search is often neglected is because the value isn't always apparent. Part of that's because of where it's owned in most large companies. If you're a fairly large company, you've probably got the IT organization who owns and runs site search, and there's not a lot of line of sight to the value that's created. And I know as a former IT professional, I really get that, right? It's hard to get the business people dragged in to understand the value. And so you're always struggling with this. What's the value of what we do? So, and especially because in the B2B context, it's not like you're ringing the register, right? So you can't say, right, I searched for Tylenol on CVS.com and then I clicked it. So, there's the value of site search. If you find Tylenol, people can buy Tylenol and therefore it's worth, $1.50 of profit.
So you have to somehow show them the holes in the funnel that are costing them money, kind of.
Yeah, so there's a cost component, but we do, where possible, try to get at the revenue. And generally, you can't get a transactional view. So what you're doing is you're partnering with the IT organization, with the marketing teams, and with the product teams to basically do a case study, right? To look for a way that you can, it gets basically create an experiment and run an experiment where you try to track through some of that revenue. And when we did this with one Fortune 20 technology company, we were able, in one of these experiments, one of these case studies, to actually identify a $9 million lift in revenue over a 1-year period because they had basically doubled the success rate on the search engine for those products. And so they're kind of their investment in making sure that the percent of traffic that might have opted out and gone back to Google stayed on their site, was more effective at finding what they needed for this product set, led to more sales. And so that was, for the IT team and for the marketing teams, a really powerful tool that they had to be able to go back and say, hey, search is worth investing because, $9 million is a very drop in the bucket from a revenue perspective. But if you can prove it out for that small case, there's likely a larger case to be made.
Right. And then when you look at your cost, I'm sure to that, it raises some eyebrows of, maybe this is something.
Yeah, we don't charge $9 million for the product. So there's definitely an ROI.
They made money off of that. Yeah. It didn't even cost them. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking about it. I'm thinking everybody has all this focus on the outside of their website, and you basically have the whole world of the internet, and then you create your own little experience for people, and they spend all the time and energy on how to get people out of this area, this world of the internet, into their world, and then not a lot of time once they're there. Like not on the search part. There's so much money and energy put into search engine optimization and keyword strings and all this kind of stuff, and then they come to the site and they act like that doesn't exist anymore because Google's not promoting it within their site.
Right.
Now, I say Google's not promoting it within their site. I know you guys, this is what you do, but are there any tools that you could recommend? I'm sure places like WordPress and stuff like that probably have plugins that I know they give you the search bar with some of these things. Are there any of those that you would call good or useful? What would you say to those?
Yeah. So, and we're actually right in the middle of a project with a company right now, and part of what they've asked us to do, in addition to the analytics and the improvement of search, but they also recognize that their product that they're using for search doesn't work very well. And what's interesting is that when you think about implementing a new search engine, there are kind of 3 flavors of products out there in the marketplace today. There are very low end, very inexpensive kind of plug-in sort of products that you could put on your website that might only cost you $500 or $1,000 a month, and you can get going. And generally, we don't recommend those products because while they are inexpensive, they're inexpensive for a reason, and the primary reason they're inexpensive is they've got a fixed algorithm, a fixed way of delivering results onto a page. you really have no opportunity to play with the dials and the levers. And those products generally don't do very well. On average are fine, but, there are
Right.
places where they don't do well and places where they do well, but on average are kind of disappointing. And
So
that's
would you
actually,
say they're probably better off just get a free plugin or jump straight to the real thing where you have
well, there you
control?
go. Yeah.
But
So,
don't pay for something that's going to kind of half get you somewhere.
yeah, so we clearly advise people to stay away from the very low end of the market because especially in the B2B companies, I mean, these aren't, $1 million mom and pop companies that we're talking about here, right? These are companies that generally have some complexity. They're going to need their hands on the levers. And so there's
Right.
basically two other product sets that they go after. They could go after kind of some of the more complex, higher end bespoke products, or they could go open source. And Solar and Elastic are kind of the primary open source capabilities out there today. And we're actually recommending more and more that people look at the open source products. And if you rewind 5 or 10 years, you really had to be technical to look at the open source products because you got to get your own server and stand up your own server and, load the software and configure the software and, do a lot of the heavy lifting. But because not only has the open source software itself progressed, but also now you have cloud, right? So
Right.
you can host these anywhere. You don't have to figure out how to configure servers. You can click on a button and get some of the open software to just appear. And a lot of the interface is now very simple to use. More and more, we're actually recommending that folks look at Solar or Elasticsearch. And those are generally the two that we recommend because the products have evolved. The environments in which you host them has evolved, so it's easier for you as a marketing professional or an IT professional to manage it. But more than anything, there's no license cost, right? They're free, and there's also now a pretty robust commercial ecosystem around them where there are plugins for those open source technologies, so that you can get some pretty sophisticated technologies on top of them, including ours, that work there. So we're actually recommending more and more that when folks are looking at search engine replacement, that they really look at the open source community or the open source technologies because they really have come a long, long way. Not only the technologies themselves, but the platforms for hosting them.
Yeah, we use open source for our CRM here for the same kind of reasons that you've mentioned there. We like the control of being able to do what we want. There's nothing that frustrates me more than having a tool and saying, I need to do this right here. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's not an option.
Exactly.
Can we just make it an option? They're like, no, that's, if enough people ask for it in like 5 years, we might be able to do that. And I'm like, I just need this over here instead.
Right.
Can't be done. Like, wow, it's you want to optimize things for your specific business use. And yeah, the open source is awesome because it lets you do that. And like you said, there's no license cost. You can put it on the cloud. As far as you pay a developer instead of paying a license fee and your cost's the same, but you have all the customization you want. You can fine tune it to your specific business need.
Yeah.
That's great to hear that they have that for this stuff. Again, showing my ignorance in the site search here, but I had no idea.
There you go. Yeah. And again, I think that if folks kind of grew up in the business and weren't aware that the open source had evolved so dramatically, I think they might be a little shy about that, much like you might be shy about actually typing in a search box. But they really have come a long way.
And this sounds like one of those things, too, that you really need to fine tune. Like bothering to have a search box and then just having it be some general thing that you can't fine tune. All it's going to do is anger people like me and drive them away.
Yeah, and that fine tuning, if you will, is really important. And there are really 4 ways that you fine tune a search engine. The first, and again, your goal is on success, right? So how do you make sure that the right answer, and answer is content, right? The content is appearing for the right question, the question being the keyword or the keyword phrase. And there are really 4 things, kind of 4 levers that you have available to you. The first is the content itself, right? So do you have answers to the things that the questions that your people are asking, right?
And I was looking for something the other day and I realized, it's just, they don't have this information on the site. That's all it is. It's not that I can't find it. It's not here.
Yeah. And, sometimes The answer to content is it's not findable, right? So there are some in the content management system, some things you have to do to make it findable, right? Make sure you have it's indexed in the right way. Make sure that the right information is appearing in the search engine. For example, we have one client that is still struggling. They have multiple content management systems, and one of their content management system still delivers horrible results in the results page because it's an ancient content management system, and it can only deliver basically one title and one text snippet for all the answers, right? So the content is not only the answer itself, do you have the words on a page somewhere, but are those words on a page also findable? And when they appear on a search results page, do they tell you the two things that are important to know, right? What is it? Is it relevant to the question that I'm answering? And is there some indication of why I should click on it? So that's the content story. You really have to make sure that not only do you have the content, but that it's findable by your search engine and that it can be rendered by the search engine in a way that is important to the user.
Right. So the tagline for that product is the same as the tagline for maybe something like Ask Jeeves. It's designed to anger. That's it. It's built to anger you. That's what it's for.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And so the second kind of lever you have is the technology itself. That's the search platform. And we talked a little bit about that when we talked about open source platforms. But it really is, does the technology itself have enough of the levers so that you can make sure that your search results are appearing? So if you're using one of those low-end products that I talked about earlier that really doesn't have a lot of levers, but it's good enough for you, great. If you need one of the high-end products that comes from one of the large vendors, I won't say their names, but most people know them. Pick up the Fortune 20 technology companies. You'll find those names somewhere there. Yeah. And they come with the services and the consulting and all that stuff that you need to run your business. Okay, great. But, you'll generally find that sweet spot with some of the open source, have enough of those levers so that you can, make modifications where you have to, such as changing the weights of various data elements in the index to make the search results better. So the technology platform, just making sure it's good enough for you. And it's just really important to take a long, hard look at the technology, perhaps do a pilot. We recommend A/B testing, and we can talk about that a little bit later if you'd like. But we recommend A/B testing search engines when you do a search engine migration, but just making sure it's right for you before you make the leap. So that technology platform can give your customers the best experience that they're looking for.
Yeah, I guess I'd say companies in the space that are looking at this kind of solution anyway are looking at multiple solutions. Some of the things I talk to, and I scream into this mic all the time, is it doesn't cost you anything extra to look at multiple options.
Yeah,
and it always drives me crazy when people are like, "Oh yeah, we have a solution for this, and so that's good," or "Oh, we found one. This will take care of it," and it's usually very easy with most products to go out and get multiple quotes. And I think the people that are within your space that are really looking at this site search or the size of companies, that's probably just an in-house policy. But many kind of small to medium businesses, I think they just first thing they come across that looks like it might work, they go with, and that always it drives me nuts to hear that and see it as a practice, because with so many products, it's so quick and easy to reach out to multiple companies and find out what actually exists out there.
Yeah, you bet. And that is, doing that evaluation, and, often as an addendum to the product sale that we're doing, is we do that sort of consulting with companies just to help them walk through that process. Because we've seen enough of these that we have, a fair sense for specific use cases, what technologies make sense.
Right. Excellent. So I think I've been around long enough. I'm sure you've been around long enough also to remember the early internet days when, never mind site search, you didn't even have search. It was just kind of this strange place where you could type in a string of characters, and if you got it right, you went somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's quite a journey from no search exists at all to now search is getting down to within specific websites. It's a whole world now, a whole business just for searching within a given site.
Yeah, you bet. And, it's kind of interesting you mentioned kind of the good old days, because kind of the third lever you have is what we refer to as presentation. And it's kind of the user experience, what appears on the screen. And I was with a client a couple of weeks ago, and they said, "Oh, well, we have this problem with this this search on this specific technical database. And when it rendered, it was something like, some 1996, search engine experience that looked, it was very retro, but very impossible to discern.
Retro is not good when it comes to technology.
Yeah, no, when I saw it, I kind of felt like I was in, I try to remember the company up in Braintree, Massachusetts, but it was in the, kind of Boston tech circle up at 128 back then. But there was a search engine company up there who really had, it really matched the thing I saw 2 weeks ago. But regardless, presentation is the kind of third lever, right?
So
is the user experience.
You can get the right search results, but they don't look like the right search results. It doesn't do you a lot of good.
Yeah, you bet. And that technology company I was talking about, that bank I was talking about earlier, the one who has the search bar right in the middle of the page and says search,
right.
They actually have one of the reasons their search experience is very ineffective is because their results page, their presentation of the results is very different from what we're trained to experience. Now, that's not to say that the way Google presents search results, right? A title and a bit of text to tell you what that title is about, right? It's not to say that that is the only way to go or that is the only way we'll ever go. But currently, that is our cognitive model, right? That is the way we think about search results. And so making sure that presentation is effective, is using kind of the latest thinking from a user experience perspective, is critically important. Because if you don't have that nailed, if people basically don't know what to click on, and that's the bank's problem. When they present their results, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful design. I just have no clue what result I should click on, and that's their problem.
It looks amazing, but I can't read it, so it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. So
sure, it's great, but it's not very friendly.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you brought up that bank a couple times. I feel like there's a little bit of a beef there.
There's not a beef. They're one of these clients that I'd love to help, but they won't let me help them, and it's just that's the frustration.
There's a beef with how they're presenting. It's the same as I have with some companies when I actually try to use their site search and they just anger me.
Yeah, you bet.
Interesting. So not just programming getting to the right place, but then it has to be presented in a way that's, your UX or UI has to be proper once you get there as well in order to absorb it. Yeah,
you bet. And I think, again, since we're all trained by Google and we spend so much time evaluating, understanding that model of, it is today the most effective way to deliver search results, which is just that list. I think like in a commerce experience, you could get away with tiles. So those are kind of the rectangles. They might have a picture of the product and the price and maybe a review and a call to action, right? Put it in my cart. So I think in a commerce experience where we don't have to really understand what we're seeing because we get what we're looking for, right? We're looking for that bottle of Tylenol or, the iPad Pro or whatever it is. So you can kind of get away in a commerce experience where the product's well understood with a very different user experience. But I think where you're looking at more high consideration stuff, where I'm really trying to understand something that I'm not familiar with, you want to make it easy, right? You don't want me to have to interpret how I should interpret the search results, right? You just want me to interpret the results.
It sounds like the site search is all about the user experience, basically. It's not necessarily a visual representation. It's a lot of complex stuff going on in the background to make sure they have a good search experience. But then the ball gets dropped on the other end, maybe because people have a designer that creates where people end up when they do the search. And designers, if they don't have a UX background or training of some type, they want to make something that looks really cool or different. And they don't, they make a concept car and they don't make something you can drive. They don't make something people know where the controls are. And you really need that UX part, that the whole UX point of site search to continue with their experience once they actually land somewhere.
Yeah, you bet. And I think that's the perfect metaphor, right? The concept cars, everybody loves the concept cars. I love the concept cars. But none of us want to drive the concept cars because they are literally made of clay, right? And we need something that might survive a crash. So it's really important.
But you can never figure out how to drive it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are going to do something cool, that's the final lever, right? Because you could tell whether the really cool thing is working or not if you have measurements, right? If you have the right measurements that are assessing, is somebody successful Well, you could try cool stuff. And again, if you can A/B test a website, just like you can A/B test, a marketing landing page. So if you were to tease off a few customers, every minute into your new experience, and you were to measure the success rates of one versus the other, you could know whether your cool thing is working or not. And I think where people get into trouble with the cool thing is they just make the leap and they don't do the experiment. They don't instrument the experiment this way that is meaningful. And then they don't, measure the results and make a business decision based upon outcomes.
Yeah, I've found whenever I'm making something that I think is cool, I'm really making it for myself, and that ends up being a problem. I'm making it because I want to make something cool, and I lose sight of the end user and them wanting to use it. It's okay. You're making art for yourself. Then don't bother to show it to somebody else because nobody wants to see it.
Yeah, no, and I've been there. And by the way, recently, the thing I like least about our product, our customers actually like most about it. So I had, there was a learning point for me when I was going to get rid of something, and I was encouraged not to get rid of it. So
got to listen to the customers ultimately.
Amen.
Yep. So can you give us a couple examples of simple things people can do for site search? I think this gets pretty deep in some areas, but before we wrap up here, I just want to get a couple takeaways for people, maybe some tips, some things to do, some things not to do, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you bet. So, often when we find, when we start working with companies, very often search success is very low. And just a quick, how do we assess success? Success is basically made up of three measurements. It's kind of a combination of three. The first is when somebody searches on something, do they see a result, right? Does a result appear? And you mentioned earlier, you were the stuff just didn't exist on the website, so you couldn't find it because it wasn't there. So are they getting results that are relevant? But more importantly, is there a blank page or is there something on the page? The second thing is if results appear and they are relevant, is there enough information to get somebody to click on